I just want to thank everyone who made this event happen. I'd really like to start with Yaf for organizing this, Chloe Cole for coming down here, and I really want to get into our donors. We've got a lot of donors. Regan Daring, state rep. Dylan Vansel, who's running for the 17th Congressional District here in Illinois. Eric Lincoln is Erica Reynolds. I'm so sorry. She's a very nice lady. My mom, she helped out a lot. And then real special thanks to Jessie Anderson. She's a really great help. Not only just being a donor. Oh, and Jeannie, of course. I'll get to that. So, Jessie's just been a great advocate for us, reaching out to the police chief, and she's just been a great in connecting us with people. And without her, I don't know. So thank you so much, Jessie. I can't find Jeannie Crowd, but thank you so much. Oh, there you are. Yeah. Thank you. Then I really want to thank Jeannie Ives. She gave us a good amount of, she gave us something. It really helped us run this event. She was with Breakthrough Ideas, which is an organization that is an advocacy and education network that advocates the cause of peace, prosperity, and freedom. And just thank you for all your outstanding kindness. I'd also obviously like to thank our College Republicans chapter. You guys are great. When me and Ross, he's the president, when we thought we were at a table and host a speaker, we thought it was going to be me, him, and a random person at the table. But time and time again, folks would just swell up at the table. And it's hard, they gave their time and their strength, and constantly we were being harassed. Constantly. People were blocking the table, speaking over people, yelling at us. They called the cops on us. They're like, and then the cops made up a thing to kick us off. Oh, very crazy stuff. They actually assaulted one of our members in the middle of the quad at night when he was chalking. And so these people have just done awful things to us. But there's something about these people too. I look at their eyes and they're just dead inside. And so I'd also like to say, we need to pray for these people. These are people made in the likeness and image of God, and we need to love them. Good. And so, before I introduce Chloe Cole, I'd really like to lead us off in a prayer. So, in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Jesus, I thank you for Chloe Cole and her bravery and strength. I thank you for everyone here tonight. I also pray for the protesters outside, that they might find you, and they might experience your infinite love. And lastly, I just pray that our children stay safe and stay away from this insidious ideology that is transgenderism. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Amen. Now, all we've been waiting for, please welcome Chloe Cole.
Seems like everybody's in a good mood today, huh? It's good to see you all. How are y'all doing?
Good. You're?
We're doing I think that's a good sign. Well, thank you so much to Illinois State's YAF chapter for pulling all this together and for bringing us all together in this room. I have been a speaker with YAF for about 3 years now, and they have been an incredible organization to work with. In fact, Young America's Foundation is actually the very first group that reached out to me after Charlie's passing. And they told me, we're not going to back down. We are not going to stop here in the face of fear. Because they understand that it's free and earnest speech that brings us together, that moves our country forward. And we are living in a time when we need it more than ever. They said, we are not going to back down on campus. We will stand beside you and continue to raise up your voice on these colleges. To those of you who are not already a part of this chapter, I sincerely encourage you to get involved today. And to everybody in the room, I thank you all for having me at your school, for coming to listen, to learn, and to open your hearts and minds. I never expected to get involved in the world of politics, especially at a young age, but I think I've learned over the years that nobody ever really does until it happens to them. Just a few years ago, though, I was still in high school, and I was known as the shy kid. I didn't expect that in the span of just a few months. Before my 18th birthday, I would go from sitting in a classroom to sitting in legislative hearings, caucus meetings, and lobbying conferences, which actually has been a lot more fun than it may sound, but more importantly, it has brought wonderful purpose into my life. To be able to transform my testimony into a weapon to destroy the life-destroying virus of transgenderism in our country and our institutions. I knew that stories like mine would be instrumental in combating abuse within and the ideological capture of our institutions, and ensuring that the abuse that my doctors put me and thousands of other children and families through would never happen ever again. When I started out, I testified on the abuses that happened to me in the medical system. But I since have realized it's going to take more than just passing laws and dealing in the business world to rip out the evil from its roots. Behind all the mutilation and the malpractice is something deeper, something much more sinister. Our generation was born and raised in the midst of an increasingly polarized, politically violent culture, led by spiritual warfare. Over the years, I've come to learn that transgenderism is only a symptom of that problem. I realized that my search for meaning, my generation's search for meaning, it's much bigger than just boy or girl, right or left. It was a choice between God's goodwill or unspeakable evil. Tonight, I want to tell you why so many of our institutions are so driven on an ideological level to silence any and all opposing views, and the deep connection between these organizations and the battle between good and evil, the tactics that they use to achieve those ideological goals by any means necessary, and why forgiveness, truth, and faith are the only ways that we can win this spiritual war moving forward. I was victimized by the same system that walked over parents like mine. And before that, that system walked over the prospective med students who might have had the moral compass to say, to assert to my 12-year-old self, a confused little girl, that I could never become a boy. My doctors, who were misguided by this industry, attempted to change me to a boy when I was a child. Because I was a tomboy who was disinterested in feminine things and disliked the more uncomfortable parts of puberty, much like any teenage girl, it was justifiable to them then that they should experiment on my developing body by administering chemical castration agents and high-dose testosterone injections when I was 13 years old. At 15, they surgically removed my breasts. I returned to honoring my God-given identity as a woman shortly after surgery because of the horrific nature of these experiments waking me up from what turned out to be a nightmare. And I learned that one day I had aspirations of becoming a wife. I wanted to become a mother. I yearned to have children of my own once I was old enough and embrace my feminine creation. For most of my early childhood, I never would even thought that I was a boy. I took pride in the things that set me apart, in the way that I could connect with my older brothers, with my male friends and classmates. But I was led to believe that these things actually made me into something that I was not. There were times when like any other girl, I would look in the mirror at my body and think, I'm never going to be enough. I'm never going to be pretty. I'm never going to be feminine enough. I'm never going to match up to what I think a woman is supposed to be. Eventually, those thoughts became, I wish I could be like my brothers. I wish I could have been born like them. I wish I wasn't a sister, but their little brother. Eventually, I began using social media. I got my first phone when I was about 11 years old. And through social media, I was exposed to leftist spaces that at first seemed to be innocent. They were based around typical interests that many 12, 13, 14-year-old girls at the time. Musicians, video games, TV shows. But there was something more to these communities. They weren't just fans. They were people who were deeply entrenched in an ideology. Many of these young girls associated themselves with this community that I had never heard before, the LGBT. And the vast majority of them were girls who once, like me, thought they were tomboys. They thought that they were just more boyish girls. But they fell into the same traps that I did. They had the same insecurities. And eventually, they were led into believing that they were not born as young women, but they were supposed to be men instead. And looking in from the outside, I noticed things about these other kids that I really related to on a deeper level. And eventually this curiosity around them became questioning. I wondered, why do I feel like these people represent me so well? Why do I feel so drawn to them? That questioning became a decision that I made at the age 12 in naive judgment. I wasn't directly interacting with these people for the most part until one day I declared myself to be a transgender young man. And the further in that I went, the more that this community of young transgender people and those who call themselves allies celebrated my destruction. They loved telling me that I looked so handsome. They loved telling me that you should feel good when people call you a man, when they call you sir, when you get called he and him, and by the name that you've chosen for yourself. That's a sign that you're getting closer to who you really are as that young man you were destined to be. But at the same time, I was deeply hated by them. These older transgender people were jealous of me because I was treated younger, because I actually managed to start looking like a member of the opposite sex. They mistreated me for the same things that they encouraged me to go through, not quite unlike an abusive relationship. I also could see things that they did not want me to. I had thoughts, I spoke truth that did not align with their dogma. I understood even then that there was a concerted effort to silence conservative voices from our side. But I was compelled into ignorance the moment I spoke about it. But my worst crime was that I wasn't willing to participate in a celebration of death. I wasn't willing to kill. I didn't want to dance around and celebrate tragedy in the lives of our so-called political enemies, because I actually cared about life and I wanted to honor the beauty of it. And for that reason, I made a really bad leftist. Eventually, after my detransition, I was excommunicated. But my detransition was only an excuse, because they already had all the reasons to hate me. And now that I was no longer protected under a class of theirs, it was free game for them to hurl whatever abuses and whatever harassment they wanted to at me. Rather than reflecting on their own mistakes, I was told by an entire community of people that my regret, my 16-year-old self was told that my transition regret was all my fault, that the support of my doctors and the love of my family and my mom and dad was wasted on me, that I deserved nothing. And of course, they used their absolute favorite tactic, encouraging me to kill myself. I went from being their poster child to a punching bag. I was a traitor to them, for the sole fact that I returned to reality. And I felt betrayed. They left me for dead during a very desperate point in my life. But something, even though I lost everything, even though I lost this community that I once looked up to as brothers and sisters, I lost the entire basis of a lot of my lived years, my formative years up until that point. I chose to persevere. I refused to allow the fear and the hatred to hold me back. But there's been so many times that I've wondered, why? Why do I keep going? What is compelling me to continue in the face of things that would have discouraged me before? And over the years, I've realized that it's because this is my calling. I was called not only to return to reality, but to use my testimony to help free other children. That this is greater than me, because I know now that Christ walks with me on this journey. And he will always be greater than any fear, any violence, any evil that walks on this earth. But before I became a believer, I had a lot of misunderstandings before about who God really was, what the word God meant, having been raised in a secular home. When I was growing up, I was taught in school that science was an infallible belief system, rather than the human study, the very flawed human study of God's design. And that all that I needed was to believe everything that we could observe before our eyes. But I had questions that kept going unanswered, that no study, no material sense of ours could ever answer. And most of all, I suffered without an objective moral foundation. I trusted in so-called science so much that it led to me living a lie. In the midst of my adolescence, I crumbled. I thought that I was born just to die and to suffer in the meanwhile. But one day I realized that I was only suffering by my own hands, not by the will of God. He allowed me to suffer only because I had to learn, and yet he knew that I would overcome and be transformed through him. For years, transgenderism effectively became my religion. It filled a Christ-shaped hole in my heart. But chasing that false idol, chasing my own desires rather than the will of God, nearly killed the woman standing before you today. In another world, I very well could have been another nameless, faceless statistic wiped off the earth, never to be remembered. But by the grace of God, I was saved. I lost my body parts. I lost my health. I lost my sanity. And yet God wasn't done with me yet. He's allowed me to use my story to show that no matter what anybody has suffered through, no matter what we've lost or what we have grieved in our lives, there's redemption. There's coming back from it. And he is waiting for each and every single one of us. And he will have your back, just as he had mine. But even as I learned more about the Bible, Even as I had theological discussions and went to church and read it myself, I struggled for a long time to understand the true good nature of God until I came face to face with evil in its purest form. There's been many instances of people who've had no soul behind their eyes, as they've told me that my story doesn't matter, as they've laughed in the face of my pain, as they've screamed, they've lunged at, and they've assaulted me like thoughtless animals. It was through witnessing true evil that I realized I have to get serious about my faith. Yes, it's brought me comfort. It's brought me restoration in my life. But it's not a luxury that I'm in possession of. It's an oath that I have made, and I need to armor myself. It since has become my fortress that is continuing to be built every single day. We now understand that through all these power games, these artificially constructed and bought and sold influence, the overregulation of our industries, that modern radical leftism is cowardly. Once we bring the wrongdoings of this ideology to the light, the only thing that the radical left can do anymore is panic. And we are in a particularly panic-inducing moment for them, because they know that we are on track to win. I've become determined to reestablish truth in the world, to fight for our generation. And I've been humbled to be a part of a movement that has created incredible change in our country and in our culture in just the last decade. 26 states now have put in laws to protect children from radical transgender treatments. The Spermeti decision earlier this year determined that these laws are in fact constitutional. And there have been executive orders.
Whoa.
Bye-bye.
What? Whoa, wait a minute.
Anyways, so there have been federal organizations getting involved in this that I never would have even dreamed of entering the fight. Like the Federal Trade Commission deciding to investigate these practices for the fraud and for the harm against the children of consumers across our country. And last month, I even had the pleasure of being invited to speak at the Human Rights Committee at the United Nations in Geneva. I got to speak to over 20 nation states about the horrors of gender ideology and against the human rights abuses that happen because of it. And I recently got incredible news about my lawsuit. When I turned 18, I filed a lawsuit against my doctors, against my hospital, that abused me when I was a child. And for the most part over the years, it's been in a sort of limbo. As they tried to bury my case, they tried to use every single measure that they can to compel me into binding arbitration. But we're going to trial. They wanted to get it thrown out before I could ever see the courts. They did everything they could. But the truth is always going to prevail. It is always going to ring loud and clear. But that is up to us. We are one tremendous step closer to holding the medical industry accountable. And I will do everything I can to set a legal precedent for every child, every mother, every father, every family who has been harmed by this evil and demonic transgender ideology.
Go to hell, bigots. Fuck off, retard.
Here. Small violin right there for you.
I'll be praying for you. But none of this would ever have happened without the millions of voices.
You say all this bullshit.
Yeah.
La la la, go cry. La la la, go cry to your mama.
We'll keep praying for him. But if it weren't for the millions of everyday people coming together, the detransitioners, the parents, the whistleblowers who have seen these abuses and practices, none of this ever could have happened. We are the ones who are joining together to fight this evil, to eradicate it from our country for good. We, the people, have woken up, and sunlight has been our greatest disinfectant. It's plainly obvious now that leftists will avoid saying what their agenda really will do outright, because they know that their ideology only thrives in darkness. That's why they try to shout us down at universities, like just now. That's why doctors lie to parents as they separate them from their children. That's why ideologues will go on the internet and look for children who they can indoctrinate. That's why they only shoot us when we have the microphone in our hands. Transgenderism is the most obvious example of leftist extremism. It is a death cult, with its most proliferative members being adults who, by and large, have castrated themselves. And because they don't have children of their own to pass down their values to, they spread the mind virus by preying on the children of others. But mainstream leftism celebrates the destruction of life. And I'm not just talking about the mutilation and sterilization of young people. They also celebrate the killing of the unborn and encouraging violence against those who do not align with their agenda. Their reckless messaging has not been an accident on their part. They've been comparing everyday believers and conservatives to fascists, to Nazis. They look at this in the same light as Hitler himself. This is not an accident. It is a coordinated offense against people like me. For years, we have been persecuted. But it's very recently that we start to see that the ideological warfare is spilling out into the material realm. In the first few weeks after Charlie's murder, there was an uneasy silence in the midst of the rage and the grief. A unanimous understanding that things have radically changed forever, alongside a deep uncertainty of what exactly that means, just what direction our movement and our country is headed into. But on the day of his memorial, we got our answer, given to us by none other but his widow. Erica showed us the ultimate act of faith when she chose to forgive the young man who shot and killed someone, who was not just an icon of peace and courage to us all, but was her husband, the man she loved most, the man who she bore children with, who she built a life, a home, a family, a legacy with. If even she could allow God to place that forgiveness in her heart for a criminal who took away one of the greatest gifts in her life, then we must do the same. Because it's not people who are our enemy. No matter how misguided, no matter how overcome by evil they are. It is sin. It is deception. It is Satan, the spiritual enemy, who we are fighting against. Just as Charlie set an example for all of us to follow in our conversations, Erica gave us an example to have grace in our hearts and souls in the battle moving forward. Championing life, facilitating civil discussion, building families and communities, and living our values to the fullest is how we are going to move forward. I think Charlie put it best. I think that every single one of us should strive to get married, to have children, to build a legacy, pass down our values, pursue the eternal, and to seek true joy in our lives. Because the torch has been passed to us. We have nobody to wait on other than ourselves, because we are the antidote to the evil that has infected our world. We are going to achieve victory because we have to. This is the battle between good and evil. This is what it comes down to. Children are going to be hurt. Fathers are going to be taken from us. Mothers are going to be widowed if we do not bridge the gap and continue the conversation. And that is how we are going to win this spiritual war. We're going to win it with forgiveness, with truth, and with faith in our hearts. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you to every single one of you for being a part of this event today.
All right, folks. So thank you so much. Can we give a round of applause for Chloe Cole? Now, for folks who have any questions for Chloe, come to the right side, all the way over here, and meet me right here. Any takers? There we go.
I don't bite. Come on up. Sick shirt.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. Well, yeah. So first off, hi Chloe. I really want to say I'm really glad you're here. And just on behalf of the universe, I'm very sorry for the way some of those people acted earlier. I know you get that way too much, and you know, just as someone who loves free speech, I'm sorry that happened. I just kind of want to know what you think about this. The main reason why I've never identified with the left is everything I've heard from how they seem to perceive the world seems so focused on stereotypes, whether, like you mentioned earlier, if a girl acts like a tomboy, she must not really be a girl, you know, that's not feminine. Or are people black, white, rich, poor? All these groups they seem to want to put us in, it really seems like they can't stand individual differentiation among types of people, and I've always perceived it that way. And I believe that if you want to change minds, you have to understand how people think and why they believe and perceive the world the way that they do. And I'm wondering, from your experience and what you've seen, why do you think they tend to see the world that way? What do they get out of that worldview? Why do they believe that? Or do you agree with the way that I put it?
I think that was pretty spot on, actually, and it's one of the reasons why I end up being ostracized from the left, not just for detrenching, but for always tending to be somebody who just, at least within that group, tend to think differently and outside the box. And yes, it's absolutely true that even though they claim to be fighting against stereotypes in our world and in our culture, I mean, we can see it very plainly with transgenderism, for example, that stereotypes are exactly what guide their worldview. Like you can ask pretty much any transgender person what it means to be transgender, why they think they're a member of the opposite sex, and the more that you explore with them why they identify in such a way, it all comes down to stereotypes. They'll say, oh, I had more feminine interest when I was a kid, or oh, I just felt like I aligned more with the opposite sex in different ways. And it never comes down to any sort of science or logical explanation. And I'm not really sure exactly why their worldview is so consistent with these stereotypes, but What's your take on that? Why do you think that is?
Yeah, so, I mean, that's the Nobel Prize question, right? I mean, if I had to guess, I'd probably just say that it really goes back to the way a lot of people like to think tribally. I think when you allow people to be individually different, there is a certain risk to that in a primitive sense, like when you have a homogenous society, well, if everyone thinks the same thing, there's no conflict, there's no disagreement. And so I don't really know why that aligns more with the left than it does with the right, because you'd think maybe you have people who think that on both sides. But I think it just seems today, if you believe that the government and everything else must provide for a type of person, you have to assume what that person believes, what they want, what they need. And the only way we can do that without getting to know somebody is, what do you look like? Who do I think you associate with? What can I assume about you? But the more that you look at somebody and you try to put them in a category based on what you think you know about them, like if I did not know who you were and I just saw you on the street, I could probably have 10 different assumptions about who you are, what you believe. They'd probably all be wrong, and I just think that it's easier for people to do that, but I don't really have the full answer either.
For sure, and I think that's exactly why we need to continue having these open civil discussions, because as we've seen with the recent political violence after Charlie's death and all the violence that's been happening, just surrounding politics in the last few years, I think that's a direct consequence of that conversation, and especially of one voice being stifled for so long.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hello.
Don't worry, I'm not going to start shouting obscenities, I promise.
Very nice of
first of
you,
all-
thank you.
First of all, I just want to say, well, full disclosure, obviously I'm not of the same political mind as everyone here, and I know that it probably took a lot of, I'm sure that there were people who, in planning to go to this event, felt a lot of anxiety, and I appreciate y'all feeling comfortable and coming out and being yourself and advocating for what you believe in. And I also, while I'm not part of these communities, I'm sorry for anyone who specifically targeted you or harassed you or attacked you for detransitioning. Is definitely, don't worry, there is a question, I swear to God. It is my belief that access to detransitioning care should be quite open if there is going to be access to transgender care as well. But kind of going off of that, when it comes to the complicated issue of transgender care for minors, which I did not go through, I know you did, I think that if that is something that's going to happen, it requires a lot of coordination and communication between doctors and the kids and their parents.
One would think, right?
One would think. I definitely would hope so, and that's what I advocate for. And I'm just curious if you could expand more on just kind of what went on in the decisions or the situations between the doctors and your parents. What role did your parents, not to put blame on them, but just to, I'm very curious, like, what was their role? What was their role in consenting and being informed?
For sure. So my mom and dad, I think, were actually very reasonable and sensible about it. When I first came home when I was 12 and told them about my feelings and my discomfort around my sex and wanting to disassociate from it, they were, it was kind of, they were experiencing mixed emotions. They could see that I was struggling, that I was trying to find my identity, and they wanted to help me through that and allow me to express myself within ways that were appropriate for children, that I think most children normally do, such as through their hair, through the way that they dress and present themselves to the world. But when it came to, especially conversations around like the more medical aspects of transitioning, they were very concerned about that, because those are permanent procedures that we're speaking about that at the time, like, I mean, they had no idea how that would end up affecting my body, and they just wanted to allow me the chance to be a kid, to not jump into any adult decisions, while also being allowed to express myself. So not really knowing anything about this at all at the time, they decided to Well, they went to the internet and everything pointed them in the direction of affirmation and getting medical attention as quickly as possible. But they thought, okay, so there must be a middle ground. We could have her see a therapist because this seems to be a psychological issue, and we're thinking that there are deeper reasons why she's experiencing this, which they were correct about. And their hope in sending me to a psychologist would be that the doctors would dive deeper into my psychological profile, into my personal history, and see where these feelings are coming from, while also like treating me in the least invasive way possible. But what they didn't expect was that, and this apparently is common practice amongst child patients who are going through this process, I was separated from my mom and dad. They were not allowed to be in the room or part of the conversations. And so they weren't really properly informed about what I was talking about, what I was experiencing emotionally. And I think the less that you involve a parent, the more you're setting up a child for failure. And that definitely was the case for me. And my mom and dad were getting really frustrated, obviously, because they wanted to know what was going on so they could help me. But when they decided to speak to the doctors themselves, they were told that this was an innate part of me, that it was not subject to change, that it wasn't just a phase, that I would always identify with being a male, and that if I wasn't allowed to undergo this treatment as early as possible, then I would end my life. But this wasn't true. I was not even remotely suicidal at the time. My doctors were speaking for me. And they were using these statistics from adult transgender people to misrepresent that as me being at risk and needing to have intervention as early as possible. So my mom and dad were not given properly informed consent. They were not really given proper information on any of this. And at every step of the way, they were pressured with the same premise that it was life or death for me. Thank you for your question.
Hello, thank you for being here.
Thank you for being here.
As a social worker, how can I protect kids without being accused of transphobia?
I think that the best thing that you can do for a child is to not affirm them in this. I think that affirmation is the very first step that eventually leads to the other lifelong parts of the process. It gives the go. It gives the signal to the child that, yes, the way that I was made was a mistake and I should change my body permanently. And this is the only way that I'm going to be happy. As the adult influences in the lives of the children around us, we should be affirming them in the beautiful God-given bodies and identity that they have been blessed with. And we don't always get the chance to talk to children, especially those who aren't in our own families, about these things in deeper detail when they're struggling with this. But I think that there are little nuggets of truth that we can put into their lives. But it starts with building up a good relationship with the child and making it so that, and we're working towards a relationship where they feel like they can be comfortable talking with you about these more difficult matters in their lives. And so you can have a more open-ended discussion about this. And I think, especially like if you're working and if you're doing social work, I don't know exactly what you do or what situations you get involved with, but there might be families that are more broken up, families of children who don't have great relationship with their children. But I think that when it's possible, you should be doing everything you can to build up a good relationship to encourage the children to build up good relationships with their family, with their mother, with their father, and to speak directly with their parents about these matters. And I think it's more effective to work in the relationship between the child and parent than it is to work in your own relationship with the child. Because the single greatest indicator of success in a child's life is how involved and how safe they feel within their own family. Thank you. No more? One last question? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure. Chloe, catch the next speaker. It's up to you.
Maybe we can switch it up and I can bring my microphone.
I guess we're doing our speaker. All
Okay.
right, now.
Oh, I'm supposed to go to the vet.
Oh, here.
Oh, sorry.
It's
Thanks.
a cat, by the way.
Thank
I've
you.
Been, I've been wanting to get one of those, but they're all sold out, I think.
Yeah, I got it at the event in April.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So, how are you so sure that your individual experience is an indictment on all transgender healthcare and not just a singular instance of malpractice when the regret rate among trans people is still like less than 1%?
It's all malpractice. And the statistic that you're citing is from a series of studies that are highly biased, that do not give their patients nearly enough time to decide whether or not they actually regret it or not. And I mean, regret for transgender procedures is understood to take about 7 years to over a decade to fully materialize and be understood. Which in a lot of these studies around regret and happiness, they're giving them only about like a few months time or less than 5 years after they've had these treatments.
I mean, are you talking about the study Regret After Gender Affirming Surgery, a systematic review and meta-analysis of prevalence? Is that the one that you're talking about?
Well, there's a few different studies. I can't memorize
Well,
everything.
this was from 2022 and it's 8,000 trans people. So, I mean, I'm citing a specific study.
Okay.
Is that the one you're
Well,
talking
I
about?
don't have enough time to like look into it, but
Okay.
I've
Have you read these studies?
I have,
actually?
yes,
Okay.
I have. And the
You
more
just,
you
wasn't
read,
just a
funnily
highlight.
enough, the more that you read these studies, the more that you can deconstruct them and realize just how biased they are. But I'm speaking generally, they don't give enough time for these patients to decide whether or not they actually regret it. And regrets, and I think that many of them don't really have a way of properly quantifying regret. They often base it on measures that are purely subjective, such as happiness, which we're not supposed to be happy every single day, every single moment of our lives. That's just ridiculous. We're, for every single one of us, unhappiness with ourselves and our identities and our bodies is something that is just inevitable. But these studies also, they will actively exclude people who have detransitioned from them because they no longer identify as transgender. And if you're studying transgender people, why would a detransitioner participate in that?
So can you cite a single study that agrees with your position that the detransition... Can you cite a single study that shows that the regret rate is actually much, much higher than what the actual studies are saying?
So there was a study conducted in Sweden, actually, over the course of, I think, 30 years.
You're talking about the
Single
Swedish study
biggest-
from
single
2010,
biggest
right?
one.
You're talking
And
about the
when they
Swedish
looked
study
at
from
how-
2010, right?
It might have been 2010, but I think
Yeah.
it began in the last century. But
And you've
it
read
turned
that
out-
study.
Yes, it turned out that in these adult transgender people who went through the process, went all the way, who had hormones, who had surgery, they actually had higher rates of mental illness and poor outcomes.
And the reason that they said that in the study, if you actually read it, and if you talk to the author, they say it was because of social pressure. It wasn't because of the medication. Because I've also read that study as well. Like, I can send you a copy if you want. I'd be happy to.
We have a doctor that.
Go ahead. I mean, you can.
Okay, yeah. No, I believe in facts, not feelings, so I'll be happy to send you all the studies.
Hey, so do I. You seem very motivated by feelings right now.
Okay.
We have a doctor, Carrie Mendoza.
Well, the truth is,
Dr. Carrie Mendoza.
it doesn't matter what BS study you pull up. Sex is something. There are only two sexes, and it cannot be changed.
It doesn't matter
no
what
matter
science.
What intervention is
Not with that attitude.
Rejecting reality is
I
never
mean-
going to bring you true happiness.
Not with that attitude. You got to put your. Not with that attitude. That's what I'm saying.
All right.
You got to put your back
I think
into
you asked
it.
your
so.
question.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I was just asking questions.
Oh, we had one more question.
Yeah, go from the doctor. Doctor, Lieutenant, tell me your title.
Hey, Chloe, it's Carrie.
Oh my gosh! What, you're in the area?
Lieutenant Governor,
drove
can
down.
tell
Oh,
him what you want.
well, it's good to see you. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah,
Section
of
of
course, yeah. So I'm an emergency medicine physician. And so are you familiar with the study from in Australia, the Children's Hospital? I don't know where he went.
Right here.
Oh, okay.
I haven't got
Are
any.
you familiar with that study? Are you familiar with the study in Australia? the
What's
Children's
it?
Hospital?
What's it called?
I don't know the title, but they
When did it come
are
out?
often cited for the regret rate 2 years ago.
Okay.
And so their calculation was based on who called the clinic back to tell them that they detransitioned. Okay, that's how they calculated their rate. And you would only know that if you went behind the firewall. So everything cited in the media was based on an abstract that was biased. So you don't calculate in a clinic and you say, well, who regretted their transition based on who called the clinic back? Why would anyone call a clinic back to tell them that when they're not welcome? So that's the false study.
So to speak, I mean, I represent a community of thousands of people who have been harmed in these clinics by this so-called medicine, and there is this pretty much universal fear of going back to any doctor, but especially doctors at the clinics that have done this to us. Those of us, I mean, many of them are afraid for obvious reasons because they've been traumatized and they're afraid of what response they're getting. And unfortunately, those fears are often substantiated because those of us who do go back to the clinic are often dismissed. We're told that our experiences are not significant by the same doctors who did this to us. And our concerns with our health going forward are completely ignored. I reported to every single doctor of mine, from my primary care physician, to the endocrinologist who gave me hormones and blockers, to the surgeon, to the psychologist who referred me to surgery. And yet from my old healthcare provider, I still get letters back referring to me as a young man named Leo, even though I specifically requested them to change my name back, to change my sex marker back. None of them reported. And you know what? There is no means to report this in the medical system because there's no codes to address detransitioning or dysphoria resolving or desistance. So with the way that things are structured right now, there is no way to fully appreciate how many people actually regret their transition or go back. Gary, thank God you're here.
All right, folks, let's give Chloe one last applause. All right, thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much. Please, quickly, exit these doors only, back here. Thank you so much. Have a nice night. I know.
Carrie, Nina Bailey.
Oh, my God. Don't look at this.